Hey guys, what's up? This is Vinnie Stevens here, and welcome to another video for my channel. Welcome to another video of album rankers. So this one's going to be quite a short one. Uh, so I'm going to be reviewing Guns N' Roses albums. So a couple of things before I start. I am going to be only reviewing the studio albums from Appetite to Destruction up to Chinese Democracy. I am not going to be including their live album 87 to 93 or their EP live Shit Like a Suicide. That's what it's called. Um, yeah, I think that's really it. I'm also going to add kind of a new edition just for kind of these more shorter album ranker videos that I'll do my review on the band as a whole. It's enough for me talking, let's get on with the video. So the first or last album on this list is Chinese Democracy. So this is the sixth studio album by the band. It was recorded from 1997 to 2007 and was released on the 23rd of November 2008 by Black Flag and Geffen Records. It was the first studio album since 1983's cover album and the first original studio album with new material since 1991. This album underwent a protracted recording process delayed by personal and legal problems and Rose's perfectionism, aimed with creative and personal difficult differences between members. In the mid 90s, the lineup shifted several times. They were bad recorded dozens of songs that suggested they could release multiple albums. The album languished in development hell for 8 years. Geffen planned for the release in 1999 and was delayed and completely re-recorded in 2000 with the cost of $13 million, making it one of the most expensive rock albums ever produced. Geffen pulled their funding in 2005 and then missed another release in March 2007. It dogged by leaks and legal disputes. This album is banned in China because of the perceived criticism in its title track of the Chinese government. There's more I would love to go into about this album because there's so much, but I have to move on to my review of it. So my review on it. I've only ever listened to maybe a couple of times. To me, I don't think it's a great album, nor it is a bad album. It's kind of in the middle to me. I don't know what to think about it. It hasn't really grown on me. I just don't get the same feeling with this album compared to other Guns N' Roses albums. There is like a lot missing from this album, I think. I think with this album, the 15-year wait, as a fan with the expectations for this album, it ended up being a massive backlash before the album was even released. To me, the complete overhaul of the band's lineup and re-inclusive nature of Axl Rose, it just doesn't feel like a proper Guns N' Roses album. However, it does have its moments, such as it has got good songs that maybe someday be considered future classics when the band are long gone, such as the title track, Better, Madagascar, Sweet of Dreams, Schindler's Revenge, and Catcher of the Eye. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is the Spaghetti Incident. So this is the fifth studio album by the band. It was recorded from 1992 to 1993 and was released on the 23rd of November of that year. This album is composed of covers of older punk rock, hard rock, and other songs. This is the only studio album to feature Gibby Clarke, who replaced original member Izzy Stradlin during their 1991 tour. It was the last album to feature guitar Slash, bassist Duff McKagan, and drummer Matt Solom. Following their departures in 1986 and 1987, till Slash and Duff rejoined the band in 2016. This was the only album not to be promoted with a tour, and was the last album to date to feature longtime producer Mike Kling. My review again. I have only listened to this album maybe a couple of times. I think this album to me, I don't know what to think about it. To me, as a fan, this album is largely forgotten about and is overlooked. I do feel like the band were rushing to get another album out by doing this album, and they just did this album for the sake of it, but couldn't be bothered to write new material. Instead, doing a cover album, or instead, an advantage they did decide to change things up on this album. They didn't go too deep, but this album, the band did do some good covers like Hair of a Dog by Nazareth, which I mean, to me, it did have a wee bit of a minimal impact on this album. The Skyliners, Since I Don't Have You, The Dead Boys Ain't That Fun, and the head track Charles Manson, Like a G-Girl. I don't know what more to say about this album. It is hard what else I could say about it. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is GNR Lies. This album is also known as Lies. This is the second studio album by the band. It was recorded on November 29th, 1988. It was also the shortest album running at 33.5 minutes. The song Patience was the only single to be released from this album. This was the last full album to feature drummer Steven Adler following his exit from the band in 1990, shortly after the single Civil War was recorded and was featured on the next album. This was the last album to be recorded as a 5-piece band. The first tracks consist of previously released EP Live Shit Like a Suicide, and the last 4 songs were recorded with acoustic guitars. These were written and recorded in only a few studio sessions, with the exception of You're Crazy, which is an alternative version which appeared on Appetite for Destruction. So my review on this album, to me, this is a good album. I would say it would be up there with the likes of their previous releases, or even their next 2 releases, but they're still it's pretty much up there. I don't know what much I can say about this album. This album has grown on me. At first I wasn't too sure about it. Now I've grown to like it. I don't think it would be like up there with like the band's debut or the next 2 releases, but it'll be not far behind it. I do like the combination of 2 efforts, something I've never heard before listening to this album. One side having their live EP, even though it was previously released, stuff which I have grown to love listening to the band's live material, and then on the second side having the acoustic set of songs, which I've now grown to love listening to acoustic songs, not by just this band. To me, at first, I didn't know how this could have worked on an album, but somehow it just works. I think one of the standout songs on this album, which is one of my all-time favourite acoustic songs by the band, if not best acoustic song ever, is Patience. Other songs that stand out is Used to Love Her and One in a Million. I don't think they would be high on my Guns N' Roses song list, and the cover of Aerosmith's Mama King, it's not a bad cover song done by the band. Anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is Use Your Illusion 2. So this is the 4th studio album by the band. It was recorded on January 13th, 1990 to August 3rd, 1991, and was released on the 17th of September that year. The same as its counterpart, Use Your Illusion 1, both of these albums were released in conjunction with the Use Your Illusion tour. It was the last album by the band to feature rhythm guitarist Izzy Stradlin. It was the last album to feature original material until 2008. Chinese Democracy. I forgot to also put that in. This album also includes the song Civil War, which was the last track to feature drummer Steve Adler at any capacity. This album was more stylistic turning point. It was more political than most previous working, dealing with the topic of violence, law enforcement, and media bias. The thematic material deals with drug use the previous albums. On this song, a lot of the tracks were written during the Appetite during or after Appetite of Destruction. The band had some difficulty achieving their final sound during the mixing of both albums. Most of the material on this album was written with acoustic guitar in a couple of nights after several months of productivity, should say. My review of it, I kind of put this album and Use Your Illusion 1 in the same spot because they are both as equally as great as each other. I have put this album before Use Your Illusion 1. First, because I've only ever really listened to this album a couple of times, compare, and I tend to listen to Use Your Illusion 1 uh, more. Also, there's not many songs on this album I would regularly listen to off this album. To me, this album, the band did go a little deeper compared to Use Your Illusion 1. If I could speak properly, on this album, there was a lot of good songs I would consider as band classics, such as Yesterday, Civil War, and Enraged, as well as I think their cover song of Knocking on Heaven's Door by Bob Dylan is probably one of their best cover songs ever. Such a masterpiece. Other songs I would consider the band's classic, but it hasn't really grown on me yet. Or 14 years and Get the Ring. So on to the next album. So the next album is Use Your Illusion 1. So this is the third studio album by the band. It was recorded from January 13th, 1990 to August 3rd, 1991, and was released on the 17th of September of that year. It was released the same day as its counterpart, and both albums were released in conjunction with the Use Your Illusion tour. This is the first album to feature the cult drummer Matt Solem, who replaced Stephen Aller following his departure in 1990, as well as new member keyboardist Dizzy Reed. This is the first album to be recorded as a six-piece band. This album again was a turning point for the band's sound. The band did not abandon their aggressive hard rock sound, but kept known on their first album. This album demonstrated a newfound musical maturity, incorporating elements of blues, classical music, heavy metal, and punk metal, and classic rock and roll. This is experimented by the use of piano on several tracks by singer Axl Rose and keyboardist Dizzy Reed. A number of songs in this album were written by the band's early days prior to their first album. It was found on a popular bootleg album of the early demo tapes as Rambo tapes, referred to by Rose during their ensuing tour as the first songs the band wrote together. Besides their stylistic differences, another new aspect of this album contained longer songs. Another change of the album is the presence of tracks sung by other members of the band, even though certain songs of the first two albums featuring other members on dual vocals. The band had some difficulty achieving their final sound during the mixing of both albums. Most of the material on this album was written with acoustic guitars in a couple of nights after several months of non-productivity. My review on this, again for me, I kind of had to put Use Your Illusion albums in the same spot as they're both equally great albums. I put this one in the same position after Use Your Illusion 2 because I have listened to this album more times than its counterpart, and there's more songs on this album I would tend to listen to. This album, compared to previous albums, raised the bar. This album didn't stop from thriving. Same with the other Use Your Illusion album. This album, it produced some of their greatest songs, such as the rock ballad Don't Cry, which is band sample hit, their cover Live and Let Die, which sounds epic and was one of the first songs I ever listened to by the band, the iconic November Rain, which has just grown on me to become one of my all-time favourite Guns N' Roses songs. Other songs I think that are great by the band that haven't really grown on me that much are The Garden, Dead Horse, Garden of Eden, and Back Off Bitch. So anyway, on to the final album. So coming in at number 1, it has to be Appetite for Destruction. This is the debut album by the band. It was recorded from January 18th to June 23rd, 1987. Was released on July 21st, 1987. The The album was released with a little mainstream attention in '87, but it wasn't until the following year, 1988, that it became a massive success after the band had toured and received airplay with singles from the album that included Welcome to the Jungle, Paradise City, and Sweet Child of Mine. It topped the Billboard 200 and became the 11th best-selling album of all time. Although critics were originally ambivalent, if I have said that right, towards the album, Appetite for Destruction has since received retrospective acclaim and has been viewed as one of the greatest albums of all time. US selling over 30 million copies worldwide. It is also one of the best selling records of all time. I would go into more about this album, but you can check out my vinyl review on this album, which I did a while. It was probably one of the first ones I ever did of vinyl reviews. So anyway, my review, I didn't want to kind of copy my review I did for vinyl reviews, so I've kind of done this a bit different for this video. So kind of my review on this album has to be number one of any ranking. It is a clear-cut choice. It is one of the best-selling debut albums of any act in the history of rock, and I agree with that. The band with this album took the world by storm, creating future stadium anthems, and it's just timeless, such as Welcome to the Jungle, followed by the melodramatic gem that's Sweet Child of Mine, and the foot-stomping, fist-pumping rocker that is Paradise City. So I was like, other songs that I have grown to like It's So Easy, the rockers such as Night Train, Out to Get Me, Rocket Queen, and My Michelle, and I can't forget Mr. Brownstone. All these songs combined together does make a classic album. So anyway, on to kind of my review on the band as a whole. So kind of my review on the band as a whole. Guns N' Roses, I don't know what to say about them. They were one of the first ever kind of heavy metal bands I got into, and I still love them to this day. I could say I'm a bit of a hardcore fan, but they are one of those bands that came onto the music scene in the late 80s, made a massive bang with their debut, which most bands can never do that. Only there's been a handful that have managed to achieve that, such as like Led Zeppelin. They changed the metal scene around 1987, which was a turning point. They were a band I think no one was in their league, and while they survived there into the early 90s, where a lot of 80s bands were kind of like fading away due to the grunge movement, they were still on top. I think to me after 1993 they started to come down. I think for me after 96, 97, when it just only became Axl Rose as the original member, I feel like the band kind of sort of just faded away into the background. They were still there, but they were just not on top. I think for me, Chinese Democracy was kind of supposed to be like a comeback for the band with a new lineup, but it just didn't make it bang. It just only kind of made a bit of a spark. To me, I think the band's kind of comeback there in the last few years has made quite a big impact with their reunion, and they have been on top ever since. To me, I did wish there was more albums they did make. I think they're not the band that they used to be, but they're still one of the best bands ever. There is a lot I could say about them, that they are very controversial, and all that, but I'm going to wrap this video up. So guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel for more videos. Yeah, so I don't know what my next video is going to be. It is going to be another album ranker video, but I don't know who I'm going to do it on just yet. It'll be coming very soon. I've kind of just sort of want to do a bit more shorter videos. Obviously, this one I've tried to make a shorter script and add in that new kind of bit. But on what I think about the band, it just, yeah, I think that's all I can say for the meantime. So thanks for watching, and I guess see ya.